Is the OM617 actually a good engine for other types of vehicles? A lot of people like to put OM617 engines and OM606 engines in different cars other than Mercedes. So the 617 turbo diesel, just for you non-Mercedes people, was the engine used in the 300D turbo, the station wagon and coupe variants, the 300SD, W116 and W126, and wasn't really sold widely outside of the US market. The only 617 turbo diesel variant that was sold in Europe was the station wagon. The coupes were never sold here. The sedans were never sold in Europe. The big cars, the SDs, were never sold in Europe either. They were strictly US market cars. Now, why this is, I have no idea, but I have a couple of theories that we'll discuss in another video perhaps. The 617 turbo diesel has become a popular swap engine for things like Jeep Cherokees and Toyota Land Cruisers and other vehicles that originally had okay-ish engines, but maybe didn't have the durability, or I don't know. I still don't know why anybody would put a Mercedes engine in a Toyota. Toyotas aren't good enough. You know, they always seem to work. But regardless, we're going to explore whether or not these engines are a good option for some of these vehicles. The 617 was a superior passenger car engine because of its longevity, its reasonable performance, and its stable fuel economy at 25 miles per gallon, which was quite good for a better, higher performing car in that model year. However, these engines produced enough bottom end torque, especially if you upgrade the turbocharger, to where you can use them in all sorts of strange vehicles, such as Jeep Cherokees that may be crawling through mud, or small pickup trucks. And the reason people like these engines is because they're simple and they can be plugged into a multitude of different chassis configurations because they have minimal electricals and no electronics. But my theory about these engines is actually that they're not as good in these applications as they were in the passenger car. Why? Because Mercedes designed and built an entire car that was a high quality car. They didn't just build a low quality shitty car, sorry for that word, a low quality car, and build it around a high quality engine. The engines, if they don't have the suspension, the sound damping, the drivetrain balancing, the free use of a appropriately geared rear end, tend to be more like a generator engine or a tractor engine when they are coupled to the wrong chassis, driveline, transmission, and rear axle. And for this reason, you see a lot of extremely worn out, tired 617s that came out of worn out, tired cars living out their last days, slugging away at 4,000 RPM with an undergeared or maybe an overgeared four-wheel drive vehicle. And while I see like the ingenuity and I appreciate this sort of thing, I still think that the irony is that the 617 goes from being a relatively refined, super clean running, extremely tunable Mercedes engine to being like a generator engine or a Chevy 350 when it's put in these other applications. It just doesn't feel quite right. I've never perceived the 617 to be anything more than a passenger car engine. In fact, it wasn't even offered in the Galinda wagon. It does okay in the Galinda wagons because, again, it's a Mercedes product. They engineered everything to sort of work together. But I think that if you're going to do some sort of custom build with a 617 and you want Mercedes diesel power, you may be better off using a 606. They produce more power. They are more expensive. But I don't know, there's just something about the 606. It just seems to produce infinite levels of power that a modern engine would produce. The 617 does fine in the chassis it was built for. But when you start putting it in something that's really heavy and has to do a lot of real work, it isn't capable of the same things that the 606 is. And in another video, we'll talk about 606 swaps and why they're so popular. But My personal preference, if I'm going to have a Mercedes diesel swapped vehicle, I would rather have a 606 swapped vehicle. I'm just saying. You know, unless I was upgrading a driveline on a 300D non-turbo to a turbo diesel, wherein I would use a 617 turbo diesel, I don't think that for the amount of time and effort I'd have to put into making the engine work, that I could really do any better with than with a 606 engine, because you can boost them to 400 horsepower, which is really all people care about. They still get relatively good fuel economy. If you put a mechanical pump on them from like Diesel Pump UK or whatever that's designed for high power outputs and analog operation, the end result is probably the best driveline swap you could probably get. And I'm not into driveline swaps. I don't know that much about them, but the 617, I guess, is seen as sort of like a poverty swap. It's easy to do. There are a dearth of very poor condition cars out there. There was a cycle where a lot of these engines were used up and the cars are parted out and the engines outlived the cars. But I personally think it's better and worth more of your time to actually investigate the car, the entirety of the car. If you want Mercedes diesel power, get a Mercedes diesel. Don't get a Jeep that's got a 617 engine. It's not the same thing. It's just like a dog with a pig heart. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any criticism about my point of view, just remember, Mercedes built the best passenger cars in the world. You may not know that, but I do. And I will see you guys in the future, okay?